Here, a doctor employed by the company which assesses people for disability benefits has strongly criticised its methods as unfair. In an interview with the BBC, Greg Woods says he felt compelled to speak out after he saw what he claims was medical knowledge being twisted against people. The company Atos strongly denies the allegations. Our correspondent Sophie Hutchinson reports.
Emma Hackett suffers from chronic pain and mental health problems. In the past few years, she has twice been rejected for the full sickness benefit following a work capability assessment.
Not only do I feel bad that I can't work, other people are making me feel bad that I can't work.
Emma challenged her assessment and won. Since 2008, tribunals have overturned well over a third of assessment appeals in favour of claimants. The company Atos carries out the assessments for the government, and both have been heavily criticised for causing misery at a huge cost to the taxpayer.
The job is, although it's...
Now, for the first time, a doctor who worked for Atos has decided to speak out. Greg Wood, a former Royal Navy doctor, has resigned as an assessor because he was so sickened by the system.
Well, these assessments need to be done independently, impartially, considering all the evidence and with proper use of medical knowledge. And that's just not happening at the moment. Pressure is being put on healthcare professionals to, in many cases, come up with a particular outcome, really regardless of the facts of the case.
Dr Wood alleges the assessments for the employment and support allowance are unfair and unethical. He claims he was instructed to change reports. He says that medical knowledge is twisted, and he says the system is skewed against the claimant.
One of the claims is that assessors are taught if a person can walk the short distance from their kitchen to their living room, it proves they can walk 200 metres and so be fit for work. And if a person is able to get dressed at some point during the day, it means they have enough motivation and concentration to hold down a job.
But this relentless pursuit
Atos strongly rejects the claims. In the company's first television interview about the assessments, it insisted it's providing a good service.
During the assessment, a number of questions are asked, and those questions are to complement the medical evidence and to build a picture of someone's lifestyle and complete capabilities. So there are numerous questions, and anyone taken out of context might seem somewhat odd.
But on rehab.
Dr Wood also claims the system is failing some of the most vulnerable who are being asked to attend assessments. He saw many distressing examples.
Someone with motor neurone disease, which again, progressive neurological condition, who I actually put in the terminal illness group because he was, who should not have come for a face-to-face assessment.
What is so upsetting about meeting somebody?
Because it's cruel.
The government says it strives to ensure people with terminal illness do not have face-to-face assessments. It says it's getting 85% of decisions about the benefit right. Nevertheless, Emma lives with the anxiety that she will be reassessed and could lose the support she desperately needs.
Atos denies the allegations. The DWP, the Department for Work and Pensions, was not available for an interview this evening, but earlier the Employment Minister, Mark Hoban, spoke to Sophie Hutchinson and insisted the assessments are completely unbiased.
We've been reviewing the process now over the last 3 or 4 years. This is the 4th independent review is happening at the moment. And actually the criteria that are being used, the assessments that are being used, have been ones that have been designed in support, in conjunction with medical professionals, doctors and nurses, consultants, specialists in these areas. And it is meant to be, and it is, an objective assessment of someone's ability to function. That then helps inform the decision that we take about what level of benefits someone gets.
If this were found to be true, though, you would be very concerned, wouldn't you, that doctors were not allowed to operate in an independent way, and that medical knowledge was being twisted, when you're talking about some of the most vulnerable people in society?
What's really important to me is that we have good quality decision making taking place, that people in the department are making the right decisions based on information supplied to us by Atos. That's actually why we assess and look at the quality of the reports the doctors complete. So I want to make sure they're right. If they're not right, if they're not a good quality, then it's right we ask them to rework those and get the right outcome, better outcome.
And what about, the percentage of appeals that is increasing in terms of decisions being found in favour of claimants and the amount of money that that's costing? It's increasing.
But only 15% of the fit for work decisions that we make are successfully overturned. What we're trying to do is to make sure that rather than people being written off on incapacity benefit, as they were in the past, people who spent years on there without being looked at, without being spoken to, without being checked to see whether their conditions improved, we want to tackle that. We want to make sure that people are capable of work, they get to go into work and get the support they need. If they're not capable, they get the financial support that they deserve.
And that was the Employment Minister, Mark Hoban. And with me now in the studio is the disability rights campaigner, Lisa Egan. And Lisa, you've had a number of assessments under the auspices of Atos. Just tell us about the assessments you've gone through with them. What do they entail?
I've had two different assessments. I had one which is called the Personal Capability Assessment, and I had that to claim incapacity benefit when I first became too ill to work in 2007. And that was a pretty fair assessment of what you can and can't do. They prodded all my deformed bones and they asked us to, how many days of the week I'm just curled up in bed in agony and stuff like that. And more recently, I had the work capability assessment for employment support allowance. I had that 2 days before Christmas last year, and that is certainly a much more stringent assessment. At one point, I was asked what stops me from killing myself. It's really that strange and cruel and weird. Yeah.
That seems like an extraordinary question.
Yeah.
Leaving that question aside, would you say that, in your opinion, the assessments have been reasonable?
No, not at all. I mean, the number of people who have to appeal their decisions and then, the appeal is upheld, around 40% of appeals are upheld because so many decisions initially are incorrect.
But in your personal experience of the assessments that you've gone through, did you find them reasonable or not?
I had a really weird situation with my assessment just before Christmas. My first assessment was smooth and painless. But the one I had just before Christmas, the next day, Atos told the Department for Work and Pensions, on behalf of whom they work, they told the Department for Work and Pensions that I hadn't shown up. And so I had to send a photograph of myself to the DWP and say, this is what I look like, check Atos' CCTV. And of course, because I was writing to the DWP anyway, I said, well, seeing as Atos told you that I didn't turn up, they probably haven't sent you my medical evidence either. So here's my form, here's a copy of my form and a copy of all the letters from my doctors, just in case the Atos didn't send it to you.
No, as frustrating as obviously that was to you, that could be put down to some sort of administrative error, couldn't it? I mean, in terms of the substance of the assessments and what's been claimed by this doctor that we've heard from today who used to work for Atos, are you surprised to hear what he's saying?
No, not at all. Like I said, the rates of appeals are very high and the rates of successful appeals are very high.
It doesn't necessarily follow, though, that the assessments were unfair or twisted in some way, though,
yes,
does it?
It does, because if the assessment had been fair and not twisted, then the person would have been found unfit or fit for only a limited type of work in the first place. They wouldn't have had to go on to appeal. It absolutely backs up.
Of course, Atos is denying these allegations, these claims, but what would you like to see happening in terms of the way these assessments are carried out? And have they always been, in your opinion, not particularly helpful, or was there a time when you were assessed where you thought that it was a fair process?
Under the Personal Capability Assessment for Incapacity Benefit, Employment and Support Allowances precursor, the assessment was certainly much fairer than it is now. They took into account things like your ability to change out of your clothes and into pyjamas once you got home at the end of a day of work, because if they only look at what you can do in the workplace, it could be that by the end of a working day you are too ill and in too much pain to change your clothes, eat some dinner, grab your nighttime medication, and the precursor assessment took all those factors into account as well.
OK, Lisa, thank you very much for telling us about your Atos. Wasn't available for an interview this evening, but the company's Senior Vice President, Wayne Gibson, has been speaking to Sophie Hutchinson and says it's down to the Department for Work and Pensions to decide who gets the benefits.
There's this implication that we are targeted to take people off benefit, and it is important that I stress that we have no such targets. We've never had such targets, and furthermore, we've never even been asked to take such targets. So there'd be no point in us doing this.
So, I mean, he's saying you're simply failing a whole mid-range. I mean, you've had so much criticism, haven't you, in the past? And he says you're failing the mid-range of people with disabilities. At the bottom end, those with minor disabilities, the system is working well. And at the top end, on the whole, apart from something else I'll come to, it's working okay. But it's this middle rank of people, and you're actually failing them. And it's a very serious allegation.
I think it is a serious allegation, and I think that what he's not saying is that we do not make the decision about who gets a benefit or not. It's just not an Atos decision. Our role in the process is to do an assessment, to gather the medical evidence, make sure that everything is medically is evidence-based, write a report that goes to the department upon which they can gather more evidence and then make a decision. So whether someone's on benefit or not is not our decision, it's not our call.
So you're saying this is the government?
They make the call. They make the call on whether someone's on benefit or not, which is where it should be, isn't it? It shouldn't be with a private contractor like ourselves.
And that was Wayne Gibson from Atos. Well, let's get more on this now with the Labour MP Anne Begg, who's the chair of the Work and Pensions Select Committee. She's in our Aberdeen studio this evening. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Just your reaction, first of all, to what you've been hearing today.
Well, I'm really shocked to find that a lot of the complaints that we have been making consistently over the last 2 to 3 years are still live and still happening. Obviously, this doctor was working for Atos until quite recently, so his experience is very recent experience, and that sort of belies some of the reassurances we've been getting from the Department of Work and Pensions and indeed from Atos themselves that things have been improving.
Of course, it was your party, Labour, that brought in these assessments originally. What precisely are you saying is different about them now to when they were originally brought in?
Well, I think some of the lessons that should have been learned in terms of how to apply the assessment and make sure that the assessment of the criteria and the way the criteria are interpreted, that those lessons would be learned, and that doesn't seem to have happened. And I think that's the concern that people have, that after all of this time, a lot of the initial problems that you would get with any new benefit should have been ironed out, and in fact they should have been much clearer in their decision making in terms of who would get the benefit and who wouldn't. Sorry.
So I was just going to say that the Department of Work and Pensions is saying, that its decisions are evidence-based, that it's getting 85% of them right. I mean, obviously that's not a consolation to the 15% that are going wrong, but, it seems like a reasonably high figure.
But we're still seeing about 40% of the decisions where people have been turned down for the benefit are going to appeal, and then 40% of them are winning their appeal. That's still very high. I think the most it's come down to is about 38%. And there's a real sort of block in the system as well, trying to get these cases through tribunals. So a lot of people are actually left in limbo where they've been given a decision to say they're fully fit for work. They don't think they are. They've appealed it, and they're still stuck on the benefit as they wait 6, 9, sometimes even months or up to a year before they actually get their appeal heard. And then once they get their appeal heard, within a couple of months they then find that they've got another interview for their work capability assessment yet again. So they feel they're on a treadmill that they can never seem to get off.
So someone is assessed by Atos, a report is sent to the Department of Work and Pensions. Is there a problem there? Is there too big a gulf, in your opinion, between the assessment and then that piece of paper, that paperwork, whatever it is, the documentation going to the DWP, and someone looking at it and saying, well, this person qualifies for benefits or not?
Well, it's interesting to hear what the Atos spokesman is saying. He's right technically that Atos don't make the decisions as to who gets or doesn't get a benefit. That final decision is made by a decision maker within the Department of Work and Pensions. However, if the Atos assessment says that this person scores no points, it's very difficult or impossible really for the DWP assessor to then decide that person should get the benefit or not. So the actual Atos decision and the number of points someone scores under the Atos system really does determine whether they get the benefit or not, because it gives a strong steer to the decision maker exactly what should happen in these individual cases.
Okay.